Welcome to Conversations with Cox and Kielseth, and to be more specific, that is filmmaker Alex Cox and myself, film curator Pablo Kielseth. Alex will join us by phone from his home in Oregon, while I sneak away from my office to call him from one of the projection booths used by the International Film Series, which has been screening foreign and independent movies at CU Boulder since 1941. We will keep our chats to about 20 minutes as we discuss whatever movie-related topics grab our fancy. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, action.
Alejandro, it's nice to hear your voice. And today I am here with Alex, and we are going to be discussing a film that you can see on the internationalfilmseries.com website called HELMUT NEWTON, The Bad and the Beautiful. It's got an amazing cast of people who get interviewed, including Charlotte Rampling and Isabella Rossellini, Catherine Deneuve.
Grace Jones.
Yes, can't forget Grace Jones, of course, who you worked with on Straight to Hell.
I did.
I want to give you the ball right out the gate, almost just because you know these characters, and this was a time that was you're all wrapped up in that zeitgeist. I just wanted to say one thing, which is that I couldn't help but really enjoy throughout the documentary, as someone who speaks German, the Hochdeutsch. It was crisp. And then when I looked up today, just before I called you up, Alex, the director, I saw that he's from Hanover, which is where I was for a year, and that's up in northern Germany, where they speak Hochdeutsch. So I was like, yes, that's why. But I wanted to, I want to know about your experiences with Grace Jones and what you thought watching this documentary. There's a lot of ground to cover. I wanted to just put the ball on your lap right away.
Back in the mid-1980s, when I was fortunate enough to be making films with decent budgets, I went to the Cannes Film Festival a couple of times and became peripherally acquainted with this floating world, which Helmut Newton clearly inhabited. And I did, and I did a movie with Grace Jones. Grace Jones is very nice. Grace Jones, I thought, was just great. I have a lot of time for her. And indeed, all the women in the documentary pretty much seem really nice. I mean, Charlotte Rampling goes on a bit, but I mean, I have a lot of respect for Charlotte Rampling too. Can't stand Anna Wintour, but then we all have our likes and dislikes.
Sure.
It's very interesting though, because of the way it is configured. It begins at the Chateau Marmont, which for me is kind of like the paragon of sleaze. You know, if you get hired by a dodgy company in LA, they're going to put you in the Chateau Marmont, and they have these kind of cabins or little areas apart for the clients who can't quite make it into the lobby.
Yeah.
And so it was in one of those cabanas that John Belushi died of a speedball overdose. So the whole place for me has a really kind of negative vibe. And we learn at the very beginning of the documentary, and this is what I want to return to in a sec, but we learn at the beginning of the doc that while the documentary was being made at the age of 83, Helmut Newton died in a car crash in West Hollywood. And so I'm thinking for the whole duration of the documentary, well, wait, tell me more. What happened? Did somebody hit him? He wasn't driving at the age of 83, was he? Was he in a taxi? So I'm thinking about this all the way through the doc.
Wait, can I just jump in for people who are listening and who don't know anything about Helmut Newton? He is a famous photographer. His pictures, they have themes of naked women, and they're very stark. But it's
a certain type of aesthetic. It's the aesthetic essentially of The Night Porter. If you've seen the film The Night Porter,
right,
then you know that kind of Nazi chic.
Yeah.
And the documentary is interesting because it does reveal that he was a Jewish kid growing up in Nazi Germany, with this culture of physique and of the blonde and of the perfect and of, the Übermensch and stuff. And that's interesting. I mean, there's about 20 minutes worth of information in the documentary.
Well, because he was 13 when he was in Germany, and he does say that he was directly influenced by Leni Riefenstahl and Nazi art, even though he was Jewish and being...
Yeah, he was a Jewish kid, and he got out just in time. He got out in 1938, So.
Yeah. But you were saying, I cut you off, and you were talking about the car and dying in the car.
But the thing is, he was he was also like in later life, he was like Werner von Braun or one of these Germans who just loves America, and so it's a little bit like the Tom of Finland movie, which you didn't see, but it's another European artist who just falls in love with the Hollywood, sunny Southern California American dream. Obviously, for some people, that's deeply suspect and horrible, but not in Helmut's case. And so it largely shows him in Los Angeles, right. Although there's documentary footage from other places. There's a very good interview of him and Susan Sontag.
Yes, I thought that was interesting as well. Yes,
fascinating because she speaks excellent French. And she really calls him on the bullshit of his aesthetic.
The misogyny of his aesthetics, yeah.
Not just the misogyny, because I guess there's misogyny, as Isabella Rossellini says. I mean, there's misogyny in just about all male approaches to women, and certainly being a guy and having worked in the Mexican cinema as well as the American cinema and the English cinema, the worst of all, there's a lot of truth in that. But
yeah.
What struck me as most poignant
yes.
about the whole thing was how he died, because it turns out they don't tell you in the documentary, and I'm wondering throughout, what happened, who hit him, somebody, he got creamed by a delivery van or something.
I was wondering the same thing.
Well, I did a little internet search, and he got in his Cadillac outside the Chateau Marmont, put his foot down and drove it into the wall and killed himself.
Wow.
By accident. A single car accident at the age of 83. And I mean, if anything should tell us nobody past the age of 70 years old should be behind the wheel of a car. Nobody. Because it is, I thought Helmut Newton was a bit of a wanker when I met him at Cannes, when I was looking into the bubble of the floating world. He said, I would like to take your photograph. And I said, well, get us a bunch of naked German chicks and we'll do it, and he never did.
What were you what year, what was the Cannes event? Do you have a film
Sid
there?
and Nancy, the screening of Sid and Nancy at the Quinzaine, or Un Certain Regard, and Jacques Lang, the Minister of Culture, the former Minister of Culture, was there the night that Sid and Nancy played. He got a bigger round of applause than the movie, justifiably so. But that was when I ran into this Helmut Newton guy, and I took the piss because I said, basically I said, I don't rate you as a photographer. I just think you're a guy who gets some naked models in there and spends a lot of money on a hotel room, and bingo, right? I didn't say that to him, but that was the implication of my punk rock response.
Gotcha.
So what did you think? What did you think of the documentary?
Well, I'm familiar with his photographs, but I didn't know very much about the man. And I really like Charlotte Rampling, and I thought she just had some interesting things to say. I really like Isabella Rossellini, and I thought she was great as well.
She says some interesting things about machismo and stuff. She did. I thought that what she had to say.
Yeah, no, she's just wonderful. And that's what a documentary does. It allows you to hang out with people who've had some very interesting experiences with interesting people. And for me, I thought that they had, and Grace Jones too. She was fantastic. It's too bad that you did not end up having a photo shoot, because to me, the dream would have been, Helmut should have done a photo shoot with you and Grace Jones. That would have been phenomenal. Can you imagine those pictures? Those would be great.
Well, especially if they were like the pictures of Grace and that bodybuilder that she used to go out with, but I would have had to put on a few pounds and get some muscles.
Yeah, you would definitely have had to gain some muscle for that.
Grace is really one. I think that she is a really wonderful person. She's had no end of boyfriends, and they're all very dodgy, but she's always done interesting stuff. When Lady Gaga just said, okay, now, Grace, you can do a duet with me, she refused, So all power to her.
Are you still in touch with her in any way, shape, or form? When was the last time you communicated with Grace?
Every time we do a payout on Straight to Hell, I call the number that I have for Grace in New York, and I say, can I leave a message for Grace or get a message through to her here? And they're very non-committal. And I say, look, it's about money. I owe Grace, like, by now I owe her about $400. And, you know, there's another tranche of money come in from Straight to Hell. And you know, if you can just give me an address to send the check to, you know, $400 is going to be on the way to Grace. But such is her kindness that she clearly doesn't want to deprive me of the money. But I always hope that when I leave that message that I'll get a call back from that inimitable voice.
Well, someday that voice will come in on the other end of the line, I'm sure. You know, the other thing I'll say is that I was so much more interested in Helmut's life when he, like the early years when he was obviously dealing with Nazi Germany as a child, and then
yeah, that is very interesting.
But also when he skips out and he's basically destitute and traveling around, and that was also like he really did have a rogue element. There was a line in the documentary that caught my ear when he basically was doing a self-evaluation, and he said that I was a naughty boy who grew up into an anarchist, but always stayed a naughty boy. And between that and the fact that he loved hate mail, I thought that was instructive in terms of giving him the thick hide necessary to wade out there and be a provocateur. And I like the fact that he disdained the word art. But then there's this one moment when he gets established and he's got the famous models and, you know, he's got the fancy lifestyle, and then he kind of sneaks over to the camera and he confides to the camera, which I think it was being maybe shot by his wife at the time. And he goes, $10,000 and I'll spend them on diamonds. And I just thought, you know, I mean, how far has the anarchist in him, you know, fallen and been consumed by the lifestyle?
Oh, I don't think he was ever an anarchist. I think he was just saying that because that was the trendy at the time, to say you were an anarchist, you know. I mean, it's like Iggy Pop, you know. Iggy Pop said he was an anarchist. He said he was a right-winger. He said he was God, you know. Just Bowie. I mean, they would say anything depending on the which way the wind was blowing.
Yeah, which way the wind blows. But I will say that he got my respect back, you know, kind of in the third part of the documentary, when there's that gallery exposition of the photos that were just very honest and very frank and sexual of himself and his wife, you know, and they're older, but they show themselves, and I mean, warts and all, and it's just, and there was something.
Oh, but they're total narcissists. I mean, of course, they don't see any warts. They're narcissists. I mean, they're just fascinated by themselves. Absolutely fascinated. You and I would be so bored with ourselves, but, you know, if we were in that situation. But they're just like endlessly interested in, you know, in themselves.
Well, that's true. But he did say that, because it was like the one time where he actually had second doubts about an art exhibit, and part of it was that he let it go because he liked the idea that it demythologized his you know, his place in the landscape, which was interesting. So I don't know. I my jury is still out a little bit about his aesthetic, which definitely treats it. It's interesting because he treats women as objects and men as accessories. And there's that one scene where after he says that, basically, he comes in and he's the guy with the trench coat, and he is the accessory, right? And so there's dimensions going on here that are at play and that are interesting in terms of subject object that are still relevant. And, you know, and the last thing I want to say is that I don't know that I was familiar with the Steve Harley and Cockney Rebel Make Me Smile, Come Up and See Me song. Like that, I really...
That's another problem with the documentary, because it's such a sleazy... Cockney Rebel was such a fucking sleazy band. And they're as bad as Duran Duran, but earlier, you know. And isn't there a Duran Duran song in there as well?
To me, it was like the Roxy Music era kind of a thing.
Yeah, and Cockney Rebel were like the fake Roxy Music.
Oh,
you know,
well,
they were like trying to be Roxy Music. And I went to see Cockney Rebel at Liverpool Stadium, you know, and I had their single, Sebastian.
Yeah, this is reminding me of the time I got into a fight with a friend from London back this was a long time ago, and when I was in high school. And I admitted that I liked Adam Ant, and he just looked at me with such disdain. He was just like,
yeah, that's pretty bad too. It's kind of like saying you like Billy Idol,
My tastes are very, very broad and not necessarily refined.
But Billy Idol has a good song. Billy Idol has White Wedding, which is a really good song.
I actually, my college roommate's sister was one of the actresses in the video for the Billy Idol video, and I think it might have been the one that was directed by David Fincher, but I'm not 100% sure.
I'll hunt it down anyway. I'll check it out.
All right. Anyway, music is weird because if you connect with it at a certain time in your life, and sometimes there's there's chinks in the armor, and things get in. And then you just absorb them. And,
oh yeah, no, I mean, I liked Alice Cooper in the sensational Alex Harvey
band.
I
love Alice Cooper. Why? No. Hold on. Actually, I want to retract that because I know that he's a golf playing Christian and that kind of stuff drives me crazy. But the fact that he's into Graham Guignol and he puts on a show and he's an entertainer and he knows how to tell a story, I think that all those elements are there for Alice Cooper. And I've seen him live. He puts on a hell of a show.
I've never seen him live, but the English equivalent was a sensational Alex Harvey, but he never did anything. He didn't have a guillotine.
Hold on, I don't know anything about the sensational who?
The sensational Alex Harvey band. You should do an internet search for them and try and find their song, "The Last of the Teenage Idols." They did a number of songs, some of which are now very offensive by our contemporary standards. Yeah. But I was totally into them in those days because I was an idiot. Teenage boy.
Yeah, we all go in and out of being idiots. And I just want to remind people that we are talking about a documentary called Helmut Newton, The Bad and the Beautiful, which if you go to internationalfilmseries.com, you can rent the film, get a theatrical on-demand experience of a film that normally would be playing in art houses, and the distributors are splitting the profits with us, the art houses that are currently quarantined. So you do us a favor, the art house venues, and you do the independent movie distributors a favor. And you're tossing a couple. And
in spite, even if the guy's a bit of a dipshit, some of the interview subjects are really, really interesting women. Like Isabella Rossellini comes over really well, and Grace Jones and Charlotte Rampling. They're very interesting women, and
a lot of interesting women. But also, it never flagged. There was always something going on that was, making me wondering what was going to happen next. And it's not a boring documentary. It's a fun documentary. It's an interesting documentary.
And especially that he was so lucky that he did get that. He managed fortuitously to escape Nazi Germany at the 11th hour. Whereas you think about like Roman Polanski, how difficult it was for him to escape.
Right.
And the horrors that he experienced. It's an interesting parallel there as well, I guess.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, hey, and I want to do one more thing. I want to shout out one more film because last night I finished watching a rather long war film on the Russian Movie Hub.
Nice.
But there's this movie called The Brest Fortress or The Last Fortress. It's got two titles in English, I think. But if you want to watch a really arduous and painful anti-war movie, here's another one. The Brest Fortress. It's very well made.
Where would you? Oh, so it's well made. Where would you place it in terms of your overall regard for it?
Well, the funny thing is, it's not funny at all because there isn't anything. There are funny things in it, but it gets so sad and tragic.
Yeah.
By the middle section, and it's funny what you were saying about the German voices, the High German that you were hearing, because every time you hear a German voice in this, because it's a Russian film about the Russians fighting the Germans in World War II. Every time you hear a Russian voice, you think, "Oh no, what's going to happen now?" And it does.
Yeah,
it's a very powerful film, and there's a kind of an interesting, bizarre linkage to Come and See. It's almost like one of the few survivors of the Brest Fortress becomes the protagonist of Come and See.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really worth watching.
What was the year that it was made?
It was made in 2010.
Okay.
I thought I would watch some of the most recent Russian films. I thought I'd watch, because there's all these free films that you can watch from, that this person has put together,
Right.
And I thought I'd watch films from the last decade, Russian films from the last decade, and try and get where they're coming from a little bit. What you can tell from their cinema.
I think that's a conversation for another podcast, because that sounds very like that's a wide net.
Yeah.
Right?
So, and in the meantime, if you have a chance to check it out, the Brest Fortress. I watched it over a series of nights because
it's long.
Because it's long. But one night I actually ran the bathtub. I flooded the bathtub. I became so intensely engaged. I'd forgotten I left the bath running. So it's a pretty good film.
That's a pull quote for a movie poster. If it wasn't such a depressing subject matter, maybe. So
I left the bath running.
Yeah. Well, all right. To our listeners, thanks for listening in. And actually, we do appreciate when you let us know if there's any glitches. We always appreciate any feedback and any comments. We are taking those in. Jason, who handles our production, is the one who receives the emails. So don't be shy. Feel free to send in comments and or suggestions.
Because we aren't shy, so you don't need to be shy either. You can. No one need to be shy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Alex, thanks again, and we'll do it again next week.
Thank you.
All right.
Cool.
Ciao.
And cut. Okay, that's a wrap.
Thanks again for joining Alex Cox and myself today. I'd like to thank Jason Phelps for handling the audio and Ted Thacker for letting us use the intro to his song, The Ballad of Slim Cessna, for the musical cues that bookend these conversations.